time. Please have a seat right now.
Good morning. Good morning. I would appreciate if you can take your seats. We are going to start now.
Good morning, everybody, and please have a seat. If I could ask for everybody's attention and finding a seat. I call to order the high-level plenary meeting to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. I would kindly ask all delegations to take a seat and keep silent. On the left side of the room, could you please, also on the blue seats, on the left side, please take a seat. I call to order the high-level plenary meeting to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. I would like to warmly welcome all of you to this milestone anniversary of our United Nations. Now, when everybody has found a seat, and in respect to the performance we are hearing right now, I now invite the artists to take their position on the stage. I would like to welcome the Met Chorus artists, accompanied by pianist Mr. Howard Watkins, together with the Sing for Hope youth choirs, under the direction of Mr. Tillman Michael. They will be performing this morning the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. I now invite delegations to sit down, enjoy and listen to the musical performance. Nations in ruins. More than 70 million dead. 2 world wars in a single generation. The unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust. And 72 territories still under colonialism. This was our world 80 years ago. A desperate world, grasping for any sign of hope. Courageous leaders gave that hope through our Charter of the United Nations. When signed on 26 June 1945, it was more than yet another empty political declaration. It was a promise from leaders to their people and from nations to one another that humanity had learned from its darkest chapters. It was a pledge not to deliver us to heaven, but to never again be dragged into hell by the forces of hatred and unchecked ambition. An acknowledgement that our failures came not from a lack of power, but from complacency. And the strong belief that our world could be better, that we could be better together. In the darkest moments of history, our grandmothers and grandfathers had the humility, grace, and I dare to say good sense to put aside their differences, their self-interest and their resentments, and to agree to work together. When faced with a crossroads, they chose the right path, the path of hope. But hope is not blind optimism. It's not the guarantee that everything will work out. It's a deep belief that we are doing the right thing, regardless of whether we succeed. Today, the hours indeed feel dark once again. We stand at a similar crossroads. We see children without parents searching for food in the ruins of Gaza, the ongoing war in Ukraine, sexual violence in Sudan, gangs terrorizing people in Haiti, unfiltered hatred online, and floods and droughts all over the world. Is this a world envisioned in our charter? Do we really need to relearn the hard lessons? Today is not about celebrating. It's about remembering those hard lessons and drawing on the courage to once again agree, to find hope instead of resignation, to find the spirit from 80 years ago once again, to choose the right path, not because of any guarantee, but because of the conviction that it's the right thing to do. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Heads of States, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank the artists, especially the young artists, for their wonderful performance, which have set the tone for our event. Today, as we mark 80 years of our United Nations, we are once again standing at a crossroads. We cannot take the easy path and simply give up. We have to choose the right path to show the world that we can be better together. Not because the last 80 years were perfect, not because for 80 years, because we have tried. For 80 years, this building has stood as a monument to our shared hopes for a better future. Yes, we have disagreed, we have struggled, but we have also triumphed. For 80 years, this institution has driven progress on sustainable development, peace and security, and human rights. Today's commemoration is not the story of an institution. It's the story of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people who tried to turn hope in something real. The people who stood between war and peace and chose peace. The people who are risking their lives to deliver food in Gaza. The people who are supplying education materials to girls in Afghanistan. The people who not only wear the symbol of the United Nations, but are out there on the ground, showing how we are better together. This is why this is the theme of this 80th session, better together. It's more than a hot motto, it's a hard-won truth. It's our commitment for the next 80 years. Our commitment to not only hope for problems to vanish, but to find the courage to confront them. Better together means to act where action is hard, to choose dialogue and diplomacy when division is easier. Hope at this 80th anniversary means that this session is not remembered not only for its milestone year, but as a moment when we called on extraordinary resolve equal to the extraordinary challenges we face. We owe this to the people, to the men and women, boys and girls who are not giving up, even in the darkest hours of war, who look still to the streaming blue flag for hope, the flag of our United Nations. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. I now invite delegations to view a short film on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations entitled Better Together.
Chose peace. People who said, dignity cannot be broken. People who carried food on their backs, who rebuilt schools, who gave shelter to strangers. People who stood for the earth before it was too late. And the people who will carry it forward. The young, the unheard, the unstoppable. For 80 years, this has been and will be the work of humanity. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. 80 years and more for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. UN. Better together.
I give the floor to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, I invite you to return for a moment to our earliest days. When the organization first opened its doors, many of its staff bore visible wounds from war: a limp, a scar, a burn. One of them was Major Brian Urquhart, the second person to be hired by the UN. A British soldier during the Second World War. He had been blown up on a ship in the Channel. Witnessed the liberation of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp and carried for the rest of his life the limp from a parachute that failed to open. He was not alone. A clerk might quietly mention a bullet wound. A delegate, the shard of shrapnel still lodged in its chest. They had seen the worst of humanity, the horrors of the death camps, the cruelty of combat, cities entirely wiped out. And it was precisely because of what they had witnessed that they chose to serve peace. Excellencies, there is a persistent myth that peace is naive, that justice is sentimental, that the only real politics is the politics of power and self-interest. But those early staff were not idealists untouched by reality. They had seen war and they knew. Peace is the most courageous, the most practical, the most necessary pursuit of all. And in building the United Nations, they created something extraordinary, a place where all nations, large and small, could come together to solve problems that no country can solve alone. And yet, at this moment, the principles of the United Nations are under assault as never before. As we meet, civilians are targeted and international law trampled in Gaza, the Ukraine, Sudan, and beyond. As we meet, poverty and hunger are on the rise as progress on the Sustainable Development Goals falters. As we meet, the planet burns with fires, floods, and record heat raging through climate chaos. And at the same time, we are moving towards a multipolar world, but without strong multilateral institutions, multipolarity has its risks, as Europe learned in the First World War. To meet these challenges, we must not only defend the United Nations, we must strengthen it. And that is the purpose of Agenda 2030, the Pact for the Future, and the UN80 initiative, to renew the foundations of international cooperation and to ensure that we can deliver for people everywhere. Excellences, au fil des
Excellencies, over the years, our organization has led the way to some of humanity's greatest triumphs. The eradication of smallpox, healing the ozone layer, and above all, the prevention of a third world war. The tests of the next 80 years will be both familiar and new. The battle will continue against war and poverty, but also climate chaos, runaway technologies, the militarization of space, and crises we cannot yet imagine. To meet these challenges, let us remember what our founders knew. The only way forward is together. Let us rise to this moment with clarity, courage, and conviction, and let us realize the promise of peace. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. I have the honor now to give the floor to Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former President of Liberia, 2011 Nobel Peace Laureate, and Africa's first elected female head of state, a champion of peace, justice, and democratic governments, a former United Nations staff member, and a steadfast voice for multilateralism.
Excellencies, Madam President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, friends, I'm honored to address this high-level meeting on peace and security as part of the UN 80th anniversary. 80 years after the founding, we must recommit to the Charter, to our common security, to the belief that nations can choose dialogue over destruction. We begin in Africa, our shared cradle of resilience and hope, where democracy is weakening, where fractures across borders from Sudan to the Sahel to the Great Lakes strain our regional architecture. Yet, across Africa, communities stand up to extreme violence. Regional bodies mediate transitions, and women's groups negotiate truces when the state is distant and humanity is near. We have learned hard lessons. Prevention costs less than reconstruction. Reconciliation is a process, not an event. Peace agreements require institutions and citizens to be real. When guns fall silent, skills training, jobs, justice, and dignity must follow swiftly. Liberia's story illustrates UN-led progress and success. The largest peacekeeping force joined Africa's forces to disarm fighters, support elections, reform security institutions, and create space for reconciliation and growth. India's all-female formed police unit strengthened protection and public trust. The mission ended with Liberia standing on its own feet, out of war, into a fragile peace with accountability, inclusive dialogue, and economic opportunity for young people. We must acknowledge that the multilateral architecture built to shield future generations from war is underperforming. That global leadership lacks a unified effort to respond to a technological-enabled world. Commemoration without candor is unaffordable. The world asks whether this House will protect civilians and uphold international humanitarian law. These are not words of despair. They are summons to repair. Our answer must go beyond words. It must translate into actions felt by a family in a tent, a nurse in a clinic, a child in school. A call for change, a renewed vision of collective security, and a broader approach to the triple planetary crisis and worsening inequality. The call for the new design of a new vision, better together, must ensure immediate protection of civilians, finance for conflict prevention, proposals that pay real people, leaders who are audible and accountable, women at the table with budgets that guarantee their participation in all peace negotiation delegations, and the de-weaponization of the information space. None of this is beyond our reach. It demands humility to listen, courage to compromise, persistence to implement. Peace is not built only in conference rooms, but in classrooms where girls learn without fear, clinics where mothers deliver safely, markets where youth find dignified work, courts where law is fair, and in daily acts of neighborly coexistence. 80 years on, the United Nations founding generation would ask if we are still worthy of the hopes inherited. Our answer must be yes. Not because the world is less dangerous, but because our determination is stronger. Better together. Your theme, better together, your theme, it must be a strategy. Regional bodies and the UN working together. Civil society and governments co-designing solutions. Women and men sharing power equally. Truth and reconciliation traveling the same road. Let us leave this anniversary with concrete commitments, funded priorities, and a timetable for action. Show those in shelters standing in the bread lines and awaiting news of loved ones that the United Nations, as it celebrates its 80th year, remains a place of peace, a place of refuge, a place of unity, and a place of hope. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf for your strong and wise words. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Gro Harlem Brundtland, former Prime Minister of Norway, former Director General of the World Health Organization, a medical doctor committed to health as a human right, and instrumental in placing sustainable development at the forefront of our international agenda.
Madam President, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to address you marking the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. I was born at the cusp of the World War II. My parents were both active in the resistance against the Nazi occupation of Norway, and we had to flee the country. Some of my earliest memories are from Sweden, where my parents worked for Norwegian refugees. And I grew up in a Europe where the ravages of war were still clearly visible, where millions carried terrible scars on their bodies and their souls. It is against this background that the UN was founded, not as a symbol but as a solemn promise. A promise to equip humanity with legal and diplomatic tools to prevent wars of conquest and domination. A promise to enshrine universal human rights as a bulwark against totalitarianism, racism, and oppression. A promise to foster peace, development, and dignity for all people. So, Madam President, let me highlight two areas where the UN has made an undeniable difference that also are part of particular importance to me personally. First, sustainability. When Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar asked me to chair the World Commission on Environment and Development, I accepted with great humility. And I am very proud of the report we produced, Our Common Future. It helped cement the concept of sustainable development in our collective consciousness. Thanks to UN-led efforts, we started charting a path towards economic development that does not destroy the basis of life for future generations, our climate and our natural environment. But we are today exceeding the planet's boundaries and approaching tipping points where there is no way back. Over 80% of the targets under the Sustainable Development Goals are today off track. Second, President, gender equality. During the UN's International Year Women's Year in 1975, I had just entered government for the first time. Many of my male colleagues hardly knew how to deal with me. In 1979 came the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. In 1981, I became Prime Minister for the first time. In 1995, 30 years ago this month, I delivered my address at the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing. I spoke of the moral and economic imperative to end gender apartheid. I believed too optimistically that we would have come further by now. I did not foresee the intensity of the pushback that would come. Even today, there are countries where not a single woman sits in the highest decision-making bodies, including among the P5. But despite such adversity, the UN has methodically worked to strengthen the position of women through education, through microfinance, through work for sexual and reproductive rights and health, and through intense and effective advocacy work. With resolve and determination, we will get there in the end. So, Madam President, I have lived longer than most of you. I have witnessed the tangible differences the UN makes through economic upturns and downturns, political ebbs and flows. I have no patience for those who dismiss the UN as outdated. We are going through a time of great geopolitical shifts and impressive, but also frightening, technological development. The UN as our common hub for getting the facts on the table, debating and deciding on solutions, and acting is more important than ever. We owe that not just to ourselves, but to the generations to come. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Gro Harlem Brundtland for her blunt and powerful words. I have the honor now to give the floor to Ms. Maria Ressa, 2021 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, award-winning journalist, professor at Columbia University, co-founder of Rappler online news site, and a fearless defender of freedom of expression in the face of constant political harassment and arrests.
President Baerbock, Secretary General Guterres, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm normally chasing you here, and here I am. It's actually a very interesting place. Look, 80 years ago, this institution was born to prevent humanity from destroying itself. Never again, after fascism manipulated information, eroded truth, and dehumanized entire populations to enable genocide and global war. Today, we stand on the rubble of the world that was, and the challenge is to rebuild the United Nations for now, for this moment, when similar forces that led to those atrocities 80 years ago are now surging through digital platforms, insidiously manipulating us for power and profit. The biggest battle we face today is impunity, and it leads to our dehumanization in both the physical world, where wars rage from Ukraine to Gaza, and in the virtual world, where our minds and emotions are manipulated by surveillance capitalism for profit. To fight that, we need information integrity to remind us to be human. I became a journalist because information is power. But news groups lost our gatekeeping powers when an atom bomb exploded in our information ecosystem, a technological one that's silently destroying the very foundations the UN was built to protect. This is the deadliest period for journalists in recorded history. More than 240 journalists killed in Gaza alone. More than died in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and the former Yugoslavia combined. This is unprecedented. They're targeted, and there must be accountability. We're living through an information Armageddon, where lies spread 6 times faster than facts on social media. That's a 2018 MIT study. It is so much worse today with generative AI. And the 3 sentences I've said over and over since 2016, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we don't have a shared reality. We can't begin to solve any problems, let alone the existential ones you heard from the speakers before me. We cannot have journalism, we cannot have electoral integrity, we cannot have democracy. This is manipulation of human behavior at the cellular levels of our countries. Algorithms reward outrage over empathy, spreading fear, anger, and hate, pumping us full of toxic sludge. Regulating technology isn't a free speech issue, it's about public safety. Because as has been proven time and time again, online violence is real-world violence. As a Filipino, I'm proud that my country was a charter member of the United Nations, one of only 3 Asian founding nations. Our commitment to multilateralism and peace runs deep. But that legacy was tested under the Duterte administration. Among the actions it took, it filed 11 criminal charges against me in a little over a year. Until today, I still need Supreme Court approval to be here. But I'm here. And my former president, well, he was arrested in March for alleged crimes against humanity and is detained at The Hague waiting for trial. Impunity ends. The rule of law, championed now by the Philippines as it chairs the 6th Committee on Legal Questions, ultimately prevailed. We moved to it. The trends are clear. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically. As of March this year, VDEM said that 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. So we turn to you at the UN. It has its critics because you have to move faster. Security Council votes paralyze action on major crises. Outdated representation excludes rising powers. Bureaucratic processes respond too slowly to urgent threats. But as you know, the solution isn't to abandon multilateralism, it's to strengthen it by addressing the very impunity that undermines international law. At this time of creative destruction, I implore you to create. Here are 3 solutions. First, end big tech impunity through global accountability. We need binding standards for international to restore and regulate information integrity, just as we have for nuclear weapons and climate change. There are 2 new initiatives, first from the Vatican, created last weekend with His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, a declaration demanding artificial intelligence remain under human control with clear accountability mechanisms. The second one will be launched later today, a global call for AI red lines, which more than 200 of us have signed. We urge your governments to establish clear international boundaries to prevent universally unacceptable risks for AI, at the very least define what AI should never be allowed to do. Second, build alternative infrastructures for trust. It isn't just big tech that failed to protect the public in the virtual world. It's also you, the governments. At Rappler, we built a chat app using open source protocols. Countries that care about data privacy, France, Germany, all their government websites are on the Matrix protocol. It allows real people to talk to real people without manipulation. The vision is a global federation of trusted news organizations, because this is how journalism will survive and how we begin to build infrastructures of trust. Finally, the third one, create. Create, that's our word today. Invest in comprehensive solutions. Let your imagination run. 3 examples that's happening now. More than 3/4 of UN members now recognize Palestinian statehood, showing that international law can advance despite impunity. On gender, the Nobel Women's Initiative have pointed out, demonstrated that in nearly every conflict around the world, women are leading efforts for peace, defying displacement, patriarchy, gender apartheid, and militarized violence every day. And finally, on Wednesday, Demokrasya Siyempre, 20 nations will pledge to strengthen democratic institutions and fight for information integrity. More than 40 Nobel laureates we have gathered together to support this multilateral initiative led by the Global South. Information integrity is the mother of all battles. Win this, and we can win the rest. Lose this, and we lose everything. Please choose courage over comfort, facts over fiction, hope over fear. A lot has changed since the UN was created 80 years ago. But its values, peace, human rights, justice, rule of law, these are more essential today than ever. It is time to create again, to build better, together. Please Act now, before it's too late. Thank you.
I thank Maria Ressa also for her very powerful words. I now invite Ms. Mariam Burka, United Nations Global Advocate for Peace and Youth Leader, whose work bridges art, activism, championing women's rights, youth empowerment, and peace building, to recite a poem.
The President, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, excellencies, good morning. Walking these halls, I realized that the United Nations was not built from harmony. It grew out of the ashes of war and the grief watered by the collective memory of what happens when dialogue and cooperation fails. Its foundation is not peace achieved, but peace pursued, fragile, imperfect, necessary, not just worth fighting for, but requiring a fight. And today, 80 years on, we gather to honor what has been achieved. Nations rebuilt, walls of division lowered, millions lifted by the shared will. But these are victories worth remembering, but the story is unfinished. The cracks in the foundation calls us to repair, to act, not to retreat. Our world bleeds before our eyes. Children in conflict zones, nations silenced by hunger and war. And it begs the question, are we witnessing the collapse of conscience in real time? Because behind every pact, there are people. Behind every statistic, there is a story. And behind every commitment that we sign, there are lives depending on whether we honor our words or not. And so this is not the time to feel powerless, because yes, hope and despair can coexist in the same breath, because healing is not linear. The United Nations is not a monument, it is a mirror, and it reflects what we have dared to imagine 80 years ago, and today, here, it asks, will we dare again? Will we dare to work better together? Because if the past proves that we can build peace from ashes, then the present demands that we build it again, louder, braver, together. I speak as a global peace advocate, not because peace is easy, but because silence is complicity, and so I will not be silent. You know, I used to think that peace was a place, a final destination we arrive at after all wars have ended. But I have come to understand that peace is not a line that we cross. It is a choice that we make over and over and over again, especially when it is the hardest, especially when it feels far away. Peace is not a silence we force into people's mouths. It is not the absence of war, but the presence of understanding. Peace is a child learning to sleep again without flinching at the wind. It is a mother not having to choose between bread and dignity. It is a father not having to swallow his voice to feel like a man. Peace is messy, like forgiveness. It does not arrive in parade floats. Sometimes it comes crawling through broken windows when we finally agree that being right is not better than being whole. Peace is not found, it is built, brick by brutal brick, by hands that once knew how to fight, now choose to hold instead. There was a time when we measured strength by how long we could hold a grudge. But today, let us measure strength by how long we could hold space for someone else's truth. Because there was a me and a you before there was ever an us. And if us is broken, then peace is what lets us lay down the shards without aiming at each other's throats. Peace is the poem you write after the war in your chest has finally run out of ink. It is the moment you return to your body and find yourself still standing. Peace is not easy. And so let us not forget the ones who have carried peace quietly through the fire. The women whose hands mend what war has torn, who rebuild homes from memory, raise children between checkpoints, hold their families like nations, because peace has always known the name of a woman, carried through the way that she chooses courage over collapse again and again. And so today I speak peace into the bones of this world, into the rubble, into the rage, into the ruins. Because if war teaches us how to shatter, then peace must teach us how to stay soft, to stay human. And perhaps what makes us human is not that we always succeed in peace, but that we dare again and again to seek it, refusing to let our brokenness be the end of our story. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Burkhan, and as we conclude and after listening to this beautiful poem, let me emphasize again, peace is only a word and better together is only a slogan until we embrace it. So I invite you to embrace and live up to be better together over this 80th session.
This is not the story of an institution. It's the story of people. People who stood between war and peace and chose peace. People who said, dignity cannot be broken. People who carried food on their backs, who rebuilt schools, who gave shelter to strangers. People who stood for the earth before it was too late. And the people who will carry it forward. The young, the unheard, the unstoppable. For 80 years, this has been and will be the work of humanity. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. 80 years and more for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. UN. Better together.
Before adjourning this meeting, I would like to remind delegation that the high-level meeting on the 30th anniversary of Fourth World Conference on Women will begin immediately in this hall. Delegations are therefore requested to remain seated while the stage is being prepared for the next meeting. The high-level plenary meeting to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations has concluded. I thank you. The meeting is adjourned.